You are not a tourist in time. You are a witness. And what you're about to remember may never leave you again. The skin is still there. Not the man. He died screaming. But his skin tanned, stretched, nailed to the wooden gate of the town hall still, flutters in the wind like a flag of warning. You try not to look at the eyes. They're stitched open, dried but not blind. A child once asked if the man was a traitor. No. He was a doctor. He misdiagnosed a plague boil. The town called it negligence. The priest called it divine punishment. The crowd just wanted something to burn. And so they peeled him. Alive. He was not the only one. This was not war. This was not conquest. This was Europe in 1348. And the punishment for failing to stop the Black Death was worse than death itself. If what you're about to witness leaves you unsettled or awakened, consider subscribing. Not for the numbers, but to help these buried stories rise again. If it brings value, leave a like. If it stays with you, leave silence. Autumn, 1348. You are in Tournai, a prosperous city in the county of Flanders. The grain stores are full. The cathedral towers still rise into the grey sky. But beneath the stone and glass, the people are breaking. The Black Death arrived just 6 weeks ago. First in Bruges, then Ghent, then here. It came not with horns but with silence, with rats, with fleas, with coughs muffled under linen and bloodied sheets tossed into the Lys River at dawn. The dead outnumber the living. The carpenters cannot build coffins fast enough. The river priests have stopped performing burials. Entire families vanish in 3 days. Wakes are forbidden. But as the bodies rise, so too does the suspicion. Someone must be to blame. In taverns and pulpits, accusations begin to circle. The barber who used a dirty blade. The midwife who muttered the wrong prayer. The foreign merchant who did not cough, but whose servant did. The neighbour whose garden never wilts. The Council of 9 are ruling elites of Tournai declare that plague must be punished, not just treated. For every healer who fails, a scapegoat is made. It begins with public whippings, then forced isolation in black-shuttered houses, then, for the most unfortunate, skinning. It's not officially sanctioned by the Crown nor the Church, but the people are terrified, and terror makes quick decisions. You've seen it. They tie the condemned to the butcher's post, not with ropes, but with hot iron hooks. Sometimes they pray. Sometimes they bite through their tongues. The executioners are not soldiers. They are cobblers, coopers, and glassblowers who volunteer to cleanse the community. They begin with the back. The knife must stay shallow. If it cuts too deep, the skin rips. You've heard the saying, the skin remembers what the soul cannot. This town remembers everything, and forgets nothing. You remember the first time someone was flayed in daylight. The man's name was Willem, a humble surgeon. He had set broken legs and stitched up sword wounds for years in the outer districts of Tournai. People said he had a steady hand. They also said he was lucky until the day he wasn't. A miller's boy arrived at Willem's door with swollen glands and purple splotches on his neck. The boy's mother begged him to cut the boils, to let the poison out. Willem did as he'd always done. Boiled his scalpel, whispered a Hail Mary, then sliced the largest swelling open. 2 days later, the boy was dead. His mother too. Then the baker next door. Then the priest who gave last rites. When the Council of 9 came for him, they didn't knock. They broke the door with a blacksmith's hammer. Willem didn't run. He didn't cry. He just kept whispering the name of the boy, over and over. In the square, the crowd already waited. They called it the Peeling Court. A scaffold had been raised with a wooden frame like a meat rack. Red paint dripped from the edges, but it wasn't paint. Beneath it sat the town scribe, ready to record each charge. Negligence. Unholy practice. Witchcraft. Willem was dragged barefoot, hands bound with sheep gut twine. No mask, no gag. They wanted him to scream. You stood at the edge, between a grocer and a widow, both clutching handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar. A young boy on your left held a dried orange stuffed with cloves, pressed to his face like a holy relic. The executioner was not a stranger. He was once a friend of Willems Martijn, a fellow surgeon who'd lost his license when his daughter died of plague. No one spoke of that anymore. Now he was the cleaner. Willem was hung by his arms, spine bowed forward. The first incision ran from the nape of the neck down to the lower back. The skin split like parchment. No one moved. Then the second cut, across the shoulders. Martijn gripped the corner of the flap, pulled with bare hands. Willem began to sing. Not a cry, not a scream, a hymn. It was in Latin, something about mercy. They stopped him, with salt. It took nearly an hour. By the end, he was still alive. The last piece of skin his face was removed only after he stopped breathing. They stretched the flayed hide on a cedar board, nailed it to the church gate. By sundown, 3 more names had been drawn from the physician rolls. 2 fled. 1, Brother Hildebrand, turned himself in convinced that God wanted him to suffer for his ignorance. The council didn't flay him. They boiled him. You were just an apprentice then, learning to read pulse and tongue, studying how bile and blood moved through the body like moontides. But that week, the apothecary sealed his doors. The midwives packed up their birthing tools. One barber was hanged just for using leeches. The idea of cure had turned into an accusation. The Black Death didn't just kill, it poisoned trust. No one wanted to be the next Willem. So people stopped helping. A man coughed in the street. He was left there. A child with fever, boarded in with planks and nails. The plague moved faster than ever, but the bodies piled slower, because no one was treating them. Even the gravediggers stopped digging. You began to see them in the streets, corpses curled in doorways like sleeping beggars. A family of 5, rotting in their beds, found only when the roof collapsed from their weight. Dogs learned to howl not at the moon but at the scent of death. Still, the council claimed it was working. Fewer infections this week, they declared, but it wasn't true. Only fewer confessions. The people had grown silent, not out of peace, but fear. Then came the case of Elizabeth. She was a herbalist, young, unmarried, with a laugh too loud for the market stalls. Her father had been a leper, her mother a washerwoman. She sold rosemary, rue, hyssop, crushed lily bulbs, and salt-pickled rose petals. They said she could cure the cough in 3 days. Some believed her. Others whispered darker things. A constable's daughter fell ill. Elizabeth treated her with warmed oil and blessed fennel seeds. The girl died the next morning. Her mother claimed Elizabeth cursed her. They didn't even give her a trial. The men came for her at dawn. You heard her screams from the next block. By noon, her skin hung beside Willem's. But her hair they saved braided and nailed above the town well with a sign, "Beware false healers." The message was clear. Better to die quietly than to be caught saving lives. You started sleeping with one eye open. Your hands stopped reaching for tinctures. You boiled your tools, then buried them. And when the next child came to your door, fevered and wheezing, you pretended not to hear. You still remember his knock. It never came a second time. The law came in winter. You remember the parchment nailed to the gates, stiff with frost and wax. The seal was black knot red-pressed with the sigil of the High Tribunal. Beneath it, words in Latin and Flemish both. He who treats the diseased without license shall be treated as diseased himself. They called it Lex Facorum, the furnace law. The rule was simple. If you tended to the sick without permission, you would burn. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, not eventually. You would be dragged from your home, bound in lye-soaked ropes, and set alight by order of the council, your body reduced to what they called plague ash. No distinction between physician, mother, or friar. No appeals. The first to go was a woman named Raina, a widow. She had nursed her own husband through the sweats changing his linens, praying through the night, pouring vinegar in his wounds. He lived. She didn't. Not because of the plague. Because of the law. They took her from her cottage before dawn. Her hands still smelled of lavender oil and ash. Her neighbours wept, but they didn't intervene. Intervention was now complicity. They tied her to a wheelbarrow, wheeled her to the central square, and doused her with lamp oil. The flames reached her before the prayers did. The councilman who lit the torch said, "God demands obedience before kindness." You remember watching from a side alley, your own hands trembling under your cloak. You could feel the warmth on your fascino from mercy, but from combustion. After Raina, the burnings became weekly, not because more people defied the law, but because more were accused. One man was punished for leaving bread and elderflower syrup at the door of an infected home, another for holding his dying wife's hand. 2 monks were burned back to back, their corpses fused in the fire like iron rods because they'd offered a final benediction to a fevered child. The streets learned a new rhythm. Dawn, smoke, dusk, silence. Even the birds avoided the squares now. And then came the accusations that weren't true at all. A merchant denounced his rival for secretly housing plague victims in his cellar only to gain his shop space. A jilted lover claimed her suitor had laid hands on her sister's boils just to watch him burn. Confessions were no longer made under truth but under torture. And once you confessed, even falsely, they added your name to the registry of the Ashen, where it would stay forever, beside your alleged crimes. You had once been a student of anatomy. Now, you were a student of shadows. The strangest part was the cheer. There were always those who watched the fires with delight. The flagellant, sex-wild-eyed men in bloodied robes would arrive hours before the executions, swinging whips in one hand and crucifixes in the other, chanting psalms in reversed Latin. They believed the burnings cleansed the city of sin. They'd scream, "Let the fire eat the plague." Children mimicked them. You once saw a boy set fire to a rat and shout, "Begone, demon!" The flames had become a ritual, a show. You even saw bread sellers offering buns to those gathered to watch. One vendor joked, "Buy 2, one for you, one for the soul of the burning." No one laughed, but they bought. And yet, the plague did not leave. It lingered. It always did. People began to whisper that the fires were not punishment but invitation, that the smoke fed something darker, that no matter how many were turned to ash, the air remained thick, the wells still soured, the children still coughed blood before sunrise. You began to think the fires were not fighting the plague but hiding it. Burn the healer, and you burn the only witness. Then came the March incident. A midwife named Claudiniold, blind in one eye, delivered a baby in the slums during a snowstorm. The mother was feverish, dying. The baby lived. 2 days later, both mother and child were dead. Claudine was blamed. She was too weak to walk, so they carried her to the fire. But when they lit the kindling, something changed. The crowd didn't cheer. It wept. A woman threw her shoes at the councilman. A man screamed that his own children had been delivered by Claudine's hands. Another claimed she had once cured him of tooth rot using boiled acorns. They tried to stop the fire. The guards struck them down. But the mood had shifted. By morning, the walls of the tribunal were covered in tar. By evening, someone had scrawled with pig's blood, "You burn saints while demons wear robes." You recognized the handwriting. It was your own. After that, the fires slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. The tribunal blamed the weather. The people blamed themselves. The plague blamed no one. It simply continued. And so did the fear. You tried to leave once, pack your books, your herbs, your old vials, and head south. But the gates were sealed. No exit without proof of purity. And how do you prove the absence of infection? You cannot. So you stayed. And you waited. And you watched. And sometimes you dreamed of the flames not as punishment but as warmth. Because by then, the only thing colder than death was life under the furnace law. You first heard of him in a whisper. Not from an elder, nor from a town crier, but from a girl too young to know the weight of what she said. She was drawing in the soot with a stick, humming a plague chant, and murmured, "They say he takes their faces off, while they're still praying." You laughed. Then you realized she wasn't. She was repeating it, word for word, as if reciting a rhyme. The rhyme was new. The fear was not. They called him Der Häuter, the flayer. He wore no uniform, no robe, no badge of the tribunal. But he moved with impunity crossing checkpoints, entering plague houses, unharmed and unchallenged. When he knocked, the doors opened, and when he left, he carried something wrapped in linen. Sometimes it dripped. Sometimes it bled. Sometimes it twitched. You heard he had once been a physician, or a mortician, or a monk. The stories contradicted, but the descriptions did not. Tall, pale, always humming, with a sack of tools that rattled like teeth in a jar. No one ever saw him arrive, only leave. The first body you saw was a boy. He had been left on a cart meant for the pyre, but someone had stopped the burning, unwrapped the sheet. His skin was gone. Not flayed crudely like a butcher. No. Peeled. Clean. Precise. As if the skin had been invited to leave and had simply agreed. No blood. No bruise. No eyes. Just bone, tendon and teeth grinning beneath where lips had once been. On his chest was carved a mark. VI. The 8th then. That was when the tally began. They didn't burn the skinned. They hid them, buried in secret. Mass graves in forests, behind abbeys, beneath burnt barns. People feared that fire might release something worse, something the skin had held back. Some barrier between flesh and plague that once removed, let something in. Rumours spread that Der Heute didn't just take skin. He took identities. He could wear your face, move like you, speak like you, enter places your corpse couldn't. You laughed again, but quieter this time. Then the noble families began to vanish. Not from plague, from fear. One lady was found in a cathedral crypt, dressed in burlap, whispering to the walls, "He wore my daughter's face and blessed me good night." Another locked herself in a steeple and fed on wax for 6 days before the bells stopped. The tribunal issued a new decree. All bodies must be confirmed intact before burial, but few had the stomach to look, and fewer dared to touch. So the skin collector moved easier now. No one watched the corpses. Not closely enough. You never expected to see him. You thought you were too small, too poor, too hidden behind old shutters and rosemary sprigs on the lintel. But he came. Not with force, not with malice. He knocked. 3 times. Then, silence. You did not move. Then, a 4th knock. Slower, wet. You remember your hands tightening around the pestle, the scent of clove in the air. Then his voice. "I don't want yours. I need it." You did not open the door. But he did. He did not break it. It simply opened. He was taller than you imagined. His skin was stretched tight, translucent, stitched at the neck. His eyes were grey, too steady. His mouth did not match his voice. And he smelled like myrrh. He did not rush. He sat, cross-legged, waiting. And then he asked, "What does the skin remember?" You tried to speak. You couldn't. He continued, "Pain? Memory? Sin? Or just temperature?" He touched his own cheek. The seam unravelled slightly. Beneath it bone. You wanted to scream. You swallowed it. He said, "When I wear them, I see what they saw, what they loved, what they feared. I carry them forward. You bury them backward." Then he stood and handed you a pouch. Inside salt, thread, a needle, and a square of flesh. Still warm. You did not sleep that night. You boiled everything. You buried the pouch behind the privy, salted the ground, and carved 3 crosses into the doorframe. But you still dreamed of him, of eyes blinking from stitched faces, of lips whispering prayers with someone else's tongue, of skin that remembered too much. Weeks passed. The plague slowed, but so did everything else. Food, light, laughter. You began to wonder if the skin collector had taken more than faces. Had he taken hope? You saw fewer children, heard fewer bells. The tribunal never spoke of him, but the fires burned hotter than ever. You wondered if the furnaces weren't for plague, but for him, to keep him at bay. Then came the 13th body, an abbot, skinned, but not numbered, no mark, just a word carved in the pew beside him. Enough. The people took it as a sign of rebellion, or remorse, or warning. Some say the skin collector was never seen again. Others say he was never one man, but many. A practice. A silence passed down from mortuary to monastery. A belief that to understand death one must first wear it. You still carry the pouch. You never burned it. You never opened it again. But some nights, you hear it twitch, and you wonder, was that square of flesh ever truly dead? Or just waiting for skin to return? You wake to silence. Not the peace of dawn or the hush of snowfall, but a silence that presses against your lungs. A silence that listens. For centuries, this monastery rang a bell every morning. 6 strikes for the dead, 3 for the living, 1 for the mercy of God. Today, the bell does not ring, and you are the one left to pull the rope. You are not a monk. Not truly. You were taken in at 9 or 11. No one remembers. The abbot said you were left at the gate wrapped in cabbage leaves and bearing a coin from Venice. You do not speak the dialect of the region. You have no name on the rolls. But you could sweep, and you could sing. So you stayed. And they gave you a robe too short and a name too long. Frater Vigilans, the watchful brother, because you were always listening. Even now, especially now. The plague reached the monastery in spring of 1349. You thought it would pass. You thought God would spare the holy. But God doesn't favor walls. He favors balance. And the monastery, despite its prayers, was no longer balanced. You began to bury 2 brothers a day. Then 5. Then you stopped counting. You just dug. And told. And dug again. They told you the bell was forged from bone. Boiled and ground and mixed into bronze. Bone of martyrs and heretics. Men whose screams had curved the metal. Who had known the fire. The plague could not touch the bell, they said, because the bell had known worse. You believed it. You still do, because the bell still rings when no one pulls it. You heard it 2 nights ago. You were the only one alive. And it tolled. Once. The last brother to fall was Brother Marius, the scribe. He died at the altar, his face pressed to parchment. You peeled it from his skin. The ink was smeared. His blood had turned black. But the words remained, "The bell must never fall silent, or we will be forgotten." You buried him with the others. No prayer, just the bell. 6, 3, 1. You do not eat anymore. Not because there is no food, but because it has no taste. The grapes are wine-drenched rot. The bread breaks like bark. The olives stare like eyes in oil. You still sing the matins. Your voice cracks on the 5th psalm. You still light the incense. Your hands shake, spilling ash like snowfall over the dead. You still ring the bell, each morning, each night, for no one. Then, on the 7th day alone, you see it. A crack in the bell's base, hairline. But spreading, you run your fingers across it. It feels warm, almost soft, as if the metal remembers the bones within. You panic. You pray. You place it under holy water. The crack weeps. Not water, but marrow. That night, the bell rings again. Twice. No wind. No hand. No voice. Just 2 tolls. Then silence. You rush to the belfry. Nothing moves. But at the base of the bell, someone has etched words into the wood. Who rings the bell for the last one? You do not sleep. You gather every remaining candle. You write your name into the scriptorium ledgers. You clean the chapel until your knees bleed. And in the morning, you climb to the bell tower. You do not pull the rope. You embrace it. Press your body to the bell. And listen. It hums. Not a sound, but a memory. You hear Brother Lucian laughing. You hear the abbot singing low. You hear the novices giggling in Latin, misquoting the Psalms. You hear 1,000 names. You hear yourself, as a child, crying at the gate, then being held, then being given a robe too short and a name too long. You cry again. Then you toll the bell. 6, 3, 1. Then again. Then again. On the final night, you sit in the refectory. You eat 1 olive. You bless the silence. You forgive God and yourself. Then you climb back to the belfry. You place your head against the bell. You whisper, "Let this be remembered." Then you let go. You fall, but the bell tolls. In the village below, centuries later, A child digging for clay finds a bell shard green with age, warm to the touch, etched on its surface. The last brother remembered them all, and somewhere, faintly, 6 strikes echo in the soil. You are gone, but the sound remains. It drifts through stone, through roots, through time. Some say bells made from bone can never fall fully silent. That marrow hums, that grief echoes. In the centuries that followed, the monastery was abandoned, swallowed by ivy and lichen. Roofs caved, floors sank, names faded from ledgers. The plague had long moved on, as all plagues do. But your bell, the bell you rang, the bell that cracked, was never found whole again. Only fragments, pieces dug from the mud, slivers hidden in the corners of the ruined chapel. A child once uncovered a shard beneath a tree and claimed it sang to her in sleep. Another found a curve of the crown and swore it pulsed like a heartbeat in her hands. They brought the pieces to the village priest. He locked them away. But still, the tolling returned in frost-heavy nights, when the mist curled low and even dogs refused to bark. And the villagers whispered, not of demons, not of death, but of a monk without a name, who sang the psalms when no one remained, and who rang the bell even when the echo had no place to land. They built no statue. They named no street. But every year, on the winter solstice, they pause. They toll a new bell. Once, then 3 times, then 6. And though they do not remember what it means, they feel the weight of it. They bow their heads. Some weep. Some stand still, as if listening for someone who might ring again. But you do not return, because your work was done. You remembered them all. And now, they remember you. And so the bell still echoes, not in the air, but in the silence that follows, in the pause between grief and grace, in the breath you hold when you say a name that hasn't been spoken in centuries, in the cold spaces where the living forget how to listen. And now, you too remember, and that is enough to keep them from vanishing forever.